and I'm good for about 2 hours. So it's 9:30 my time, 10:30 your time, and we are live right now. So go for it.
All right. Well, welcome back to God's Property Radio in this special edition. I go by Dan.
And I go by Sam.
And I go by Leonard.
And I guess that would be Rob.
Well, everyone, we are very excited to have this episode tonight. We have our only two returning guests here with us, doing a special 9/11 episode with us. And actually, Leonard Ulrich is here live with Sam and I tonight. We're going to throw a little treat in here later on for you guys to be able to listen to of how Leonard surprised Sam with his arrival. So we're, like I said, we're gonna jump in here and start talking about 9/11. We're gonna get Leonard and Rob to take us away here in a moment. But before we do that, I wanted to share a thought. I was recently on a business trip, and I was visiting a friend of mine over the weekend and his wife, and he's a youth pastor, and he was introducing me to a bunch of the students in his youth group. And he said at the end of that evening, he said, Dan, most of the students you met tonight weren't alive when 9/11 happened. Isn't that weird? And I was like, whoa. No, yeah, but it really...
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have to explain something here. Sam was still asleep when I woke him up, literally. And quite honestly, he did the Keanu Reeves whoa twice. And in progressive stages of awakening. And he still said whoa again. And so whenever somebody says whoa around here, we have this, Neo from the Matrix flashback, because that's exactly what I saw and heard Sam doing. So that's just a little aside. Please keep going.
No, but wait, Leonard, with you being from Canada, all you have to do is add A to the end of it, and we've got the McKinsey brothers, right?
I'm Bob. Here's my brother Doug, and my other brother Doug.
No way, you hoser.
I thought I would come to temperatures that were warmer, but instead I bring the cold Canadian Arctic air with me. And long story short, it took me 30 hours to get from one plane to another to get here on time. And I got here literally at 2:30 a.m. on 3 hours of sleep to surprise Sam. And he went, whoa. It was worth it.
Yeah, you literally brought the cold with you, because I'm down here in Dallas. We were supposed to do this broadcast last night, and Dallas, Texas got all of about 1/8 of an inch of snow, believe it or not, and they shut the entire city down. So I couldn't go anywhere, and all the offices were closed and everything like that, so hence we are doing it tonight.
Yes, we Canadians officially mock you for that. Okay, we eat after breakfast, and
Rightfully
we smile.
so. Rightfully so. Yeah, well, I came from New England, so I'm used to driving in 3 feet of snow. It's not a big deal, so I would mock right along with you.
Yeah, I feel like Rob is kind of mocking his neighbors right there with you. So, okay. So anyway, yes, I said whoa to Andrew, my friend, but it took me back, and I've been thinking about that, and I was sharing with Leonard earlier tonight. I think there are two possibilities with this younger generation, if you will, which is odd for me to say because it makes me feel old, and I'm not that old. But I think either A, it is going to be easier for them to accept the truth of what really happened on 9/11, which we're going to be discussing tonight, or B, it very well could be harder because the media programming has been raised immensely since they were born. However, in either case, they don't have the emotional tie that any of us have to 9/11, which is why I wonder if possibly it might be easier for them to accept the truth. It's kind of like they don't have a dog in the fight so much, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I wasn't sure how you guys wanted to begin this evening, but I had a video queued up, and if you don't mind, I'd like to play it. It's a little 5-minute piece done by James Corbett of the Corbett Report, and it's called "A Conspiracy 9/11: A Conspiracy Theory." And so it's sort of just an overview, albeit a very sarcastic one, done to give an entire overview of the official story. Would that be all right?
That would be great, Rob. Why don't
All
you start us off with that?
Okay, here we go. This is actually, I'm going to do a screen share. I actually embedded sort of an edited version of his video into a video that I produced called The Omega Plan, which people can check out on YouTube if they just do a YouTube search for The Omega Plan with a question mark. And beginning at 222, I get into the issue of 9/11, but backing up to President Bush's selection.
Polls have just now closed in 6 additional states, representing 66 electoral votes.
We must follow no other course. Now it is a seed upon the wind, taking root in many nations. We will confront weapons of mass destruction. We will build our defenses beyond challenge, lest weakness invite challenge. This work continues. The story goes on, and an angel still rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm.
Keep in mind that was said before 9/11.
Heard the first one come in. I didn't know what it was. It sounded like a missile.
Oh my God, Ed, another plane just hit the World Trade Center.
Wait, oh my God, oh my God, the building fell!
We have no idea what caused this.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world, using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon and the Budget Analyst Office, where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
Nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. You will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever.
That about narrows it down to a nice summary for all of those of you who have never heard of what happened on 9/11 and who may not have even been born. If you want a snapshot summary, believe it or not, that comic freak show of a presentation is actually the official story of 9/11, just done with a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek sarcasm. And actually, there was something else I wanted to put up right here, and let me just do a screen share. I put together a little PowerPoint screen right here for some recommended viewing for those of you who maybe have never heard of any of the things we're going to talk about tonight, whether it was a conspiracy or not. I would suggest that all of you watch these videos. If you've seen them before, you might want to watch them again, because it's time that we keep refreshing our memory about what happened. I just played for you sort of an edited version. I shortened it a little bit, of the 9/11 Conspiracy Theory by James Corbett of the Corbett Report, and 9/11 Anatomy of a Great Deception, the complete version. I just watched that a couple of days ago. It is an excellent introductory documentary for somebody who's never heard of any of this, who still is sucking on the blue pill and believes the official story, and can't imagine that anybody else could believe it's not true. That's a great introductory video, Anatomy of a Great Deception. Of course, Loose Change, that's the one that impacted a lot of us. That was the first one that I saw that really got my gears turning, and we'll talk about that. 9/11 Painful Decisions, 9/11 Mysteries, and In Plain Sight, 9/11 Conspiracy Theory. And if you want to, usually what comes up next is, well, what's the motive? Why would we do it to ourselves, and blah, blah, blah. Well, who done it? For that, the video I just showed you was a video that I put together called The Omega Plan. Another one, Everything is a Rich Man's Trick. And of course, Leonard's video, New World Order, Secret Societies, and Biblical Prophecy, Volume 1. Highly recommend that one. And 9/11 Conspiracy Solved, Names, Connections, and Details Exposed. That's an excellent one for showing who had motive and why. So that's a list of videos for you guys to check out after you finish watching this one.
All right, I'm on. Okay, so what I wanted to do here, before we get into the nitty-gritty here, I would really like, I know that Leonard has had quite, a lot of your paradigm shift, or when you realized these things, was because of 9/11. And I don't know about you, Rob, but I kind of wanted to get your guys' stories of, like, firsthand what that day was like for you, and second of all, when, and just kind of the story of as you realized what was going on and why, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty from there, I guess, on both your ends. And I guess if Leonard wants to start or Rob wants to start, doesn't matter to me. I'm going to mute my mic now. So.
Okay, well, I'll just chime in here. My awakening began when, in about June 2005, interestingly, on the summer solstice, and I was simply rereading Matthew 24, and I was just simply trying to get a handle on it. There's a lot of commentaries on, Matthew 24, talking about the rebirth of Israel, and does this apply to Israel being reborn, so to speak, in 1948? And so I just went online and got some commentaries, just get some different opinions, and one of these opinions mentioned the word conspiracy. And so I went down that road. And for about a week, my entire understanding of the world was utterly destroyed. And you have to understand that I was so heavily invested in the conventional narratives of, the clash of empires narrative of history, or the unintentional or accidental view of history, that I had to discard that view because I couldn't disprove 9/11. And as a matter of fact, the deeper I got into 9/11, the more I realized that the intentional view of history is the only acceptable view. I don't use the word the conspiratorial view of history because it's got so much baggage associated with it that I avoid that term. I use the intentional view of history. But that's not to say that I don't like the word conspiracy, because I have two rules of research since my awakening in June 2005. Number one is you must have the original documents. If you don't have the original documents, then all you've got is is historical hearsay. You can go to the internet and get whatever you want. That doesn't make it true. Okay, so get the originals. And number two, does it agree with the biblical perspective? And if the answer to question number two is no, then discard it. So with law or guideline number one and number two in hand, you start rereading the Bible with new eyes, and you come across gems like Psalm 64. Here's just 4 verses. Here we go. Psalm 64, written by David, who incidentally caused his own little conspiracy by bumping off his general's wife after having an affair with her. So, here's David in Psalm 64, just a couple verses. Hide me from the conspiracy of the wicked, from the plots of evildoers. They sharpen their tongues like swords and aim cruel words like deadly arrows. They shoot from ambush at the innocent. They shoot suddenly without fear. They encourage each other in evil plans. They talk about hiding their snares. They say, who will see it? They plot injustice and say, we have devised a perfect plan. Surely the human mind and heart are cunning. Now, I submit to you that that is the perspective that I view history through. Because if we accept the Bible as the ultimate guidebook to human nature and the supernatural, then I would say this is accurate. And it's quite ironic, because I would say that the number one group on the planet Earth that has the most resistance to the intentional view of history are my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. And that's very sad. You know, I mean, I've got 5 million views on the internet, but I can't show my film to my own church because it's too political, even though I don't tell you who to vote for, even though I've always said that there's no political solution to a spiritual problem. So Jesus was misunderstood by family friends. James, his own brother, didn't believe in him until after the resurrection. So again, everything in the Bible is more relevant to me now than before 9/11. So no matter how dark a picture that I can prove, not conject, it still boosts my faith. Okay, real quick.
So what was it like the day of 9/11 for you, the actual day, September 11th, 2001? Can you just tell me what you were doing, etc.? Like, just if you could lay that out for us.
I work at about a 1,500-person factory, and during that era, they allowed stereos to be blaring music of all kinds throughout the factory. And as the news of 9/11 broke on the factory floor, that was the one day that all the radios throughout the whole plant were turned to news channels. Nobody wanted to hear music. It was all, just give me the news, give me the facts. And one person, I guess, took advantage of the situation and threw the fire alarm and literally stopped production in this huge factory. So I bring that up because I wasn't around, or neither was Rob, when Kennedy was assassinated, and unless you were there, so to speak, it doesn't have an emotional impact on you. But just like all trauma, you know exactly where you were, who you were with, how everyone else reacted, and then you're trying to process this huge piece of information that will change your life from then on. And I submit to everyone out there that the event known as 9/11 was created for maximum emotional impact, and that day has justified over $10 trillion worth of money spent on war and all kinds of budgetary misalignments, etc. And it's not to forget about the over 2 million people that have died in this never-ending war on terror. And since the war on terror has been used to slaughter more Christians since the Crusades. So congratulations, the war on terror is an utter financial and security failure.
All right. Hey, Rob, could you tell us your experience, I guess, as to what you were doing on 9/11 and your memory of that, and then follow that up with your realization to the intentional view of history like Leonard has just shared with us?
Sure. I agree with Leonard's assessment that it was designed for maximum emotional impact. I ask people all the time, I say, what did you have for breakfast 6 years ago, 2 months, 1 week, and 3 days ago? And unless you have the same thing every morning, nobody can remember that. Then I ask, where were you at about 8:45 a.m. on September 11th, 2001? Everybody knows exactly where they were and what they were doing between roughly 8:45 and 10:30. Everybody knows. And so I asked the question, why is it that you know exactly where you were, exactly what you were doing on that particular morning, but you don't in the previous example? And it's because the difference between expectation and reality was pretty huge. You know, when your expectation is today is just going to be another day like any other day, and the reality is, you know, somewhere around here, there's not a whole lot of emotional impact on you, so you don't remember anything. But if your expectation is today's going to be a day like any other day, and all of a sudden buildings are falling and planes are crashing, and you know, that's the gap in there causes the intense feelings. And for me, I was actually working at a fair. I was an audio technician at a big, the Eastern States Exposition is a big fair they have every year, and it's all the New England states get together, and it's a big deal. And I had gotten a job there as an audio technician, and I ended up settling into a really sweet gig on the gazebo stage, which is in this little kind of a colonial village area. And on that particular stage is where they did comedy juggling acts and unicycle and kid shows and stuff like that. So, you know, my days were lots of fun, you know, and basically all I had to do is make sure there wasn't any feedback while the jugglers and, you know, guys were doing their thing, you know. So my expectation was it was just going to be another day at work, you know, doing some fun stuff. And my alarm went off, and it went off to the radio, and of course it went off about 9 o'clock, just before 9 o'clock, and every radio station all of a sudden was talking about this plane that hit the North Tower. And now I was a helicopter pilot for 6 of the 8 years that I was in the Army, so I've been around aviation for quite a while, and I thought, wow, what a terrible aviation accident this was. That's all I thought it was. I thought, you know, plane went off course somehow and slammed into the building, you know. And as tragic as that is, I kind of wrote it off as just a really bad, terrible, tragic accident. And so I took a shower, got dressed, said goodbye to my wife, got my car, and all of a sudden now, you know, here it is, like, what, 15 minutes later or so, I find out that the South Tower got hit. And all of a sudden, I'm going, this isn't an accident. We're at war, you know. So I'm thinking about that all the way to work, and then when I get there, the entire fairground is halted. I mean, like everybody is around whatever TV screen or radio they could find. Everybody's jaws on the floor. Everybody's crying. Everybody's standing around going, I can't believe this. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. You know, and anybody who remembers what was going on TV that day, it was trauma-based mind control at its finest. And just to give people an idea, I prepared a little screen share here for you of a rundown of events. Okay, we're told 4 planes allegedly hijacked by 19 mostly Saudi quote-unquote terrorists did the following. 8:46 a.m. North Tower hit by American Airlines Flight 11. Barely 15 minutes later, South Tower hit by United Flight 175. 9:30, half hour later, Pentagon hit by American Airlines 77. Okay, that's like in less than an hour. Okay, folks. I mean, let that sink in. In less than an hour, you got 2 major buildings in New York City are slammed into, and then the Pentagon, of all things, the Pentagon got hit? Are you kidding me? The most secure building on the planet got hit? Okay, and then at 9:59, we barely had enough time to process the Pentagon getting hit. The South Tower falls at free fall speed. Okay, if I remember right, free fall speed is like 9 seconds for a building of that size, and it was just about 10 seconds. It was like 9.3 versus 10.2 or something. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was about as close to free fall speed as you can get after burning for less than an hour. And you know, I just got to work, and everybody's just processing, wow, 2 buildings got hit, and the Pentagon got hit. And as we're just kind of thinking that through, these 3 buildings got hit, we see this massive structure come tumbling down at free fall speed. I mean, you want to talk about trauma. Everybody was just completely in shock. And then, 8 minutes later, United Flight 93 crashes in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And then at 10:30, barely a half hour later, the North Tower comes down at free fall speed after burning for less than 2 hours. And we saw that played over and over and over and over and over and over and over again all day long. We saw this coming down, coming down, coming down, coming down. I mean, I have never heard of trauma-based mind control before that, but that is the perfect poster child example of trauma-based mind control. And all of us are clueless as to who did it and why, but automatically the assumption starts going on that it's Middle Eastern terrorists. So my attitude, like many, was let's turn the entire Middle East into a glass factory. When do we get started? You know, nuke the whole place. Just get it over with. You know, we supposedly ended World War II that way. Let's just finish it. Okay, they're always causing trouble over there anyway, so let's just nuke the whole place. That was our attitude. I almost, to be honest with you, I'd almost re-enlisted. I got out of the military after 8 years in '93, and had been out for 5 years. And then I questioned the decision. I wasn't sure if after 5 years of being out, I wasn't sure if I did the right thing, and I kind of missed it. So, and actually, as a side note, my ambition was to get into the space program in NASA, and the cutoff was 28. So I had 1 more year left before that cutoff, and I figured, you know what, if there's any chance at all that I could make it, I'm going to go back in for a year and see what happens. Went in for another year in '98 and realized why I got out in the first place. Got out and never looked back after that. So I'd been out for 5 years, went back in for 1 year, got out again, but here it is 2001. I'm thinking about going back in again. And I know a lot of guys felt that way, and many people did go back in, signed up right away. And, you know, anybody who joins a service goes through what I call 8 weeks of trauma-based mind control called boot camp. And that's where they do nothing but yell at you, scream at you, scare the tar out of you, and beat the snot out of you on a fairly regular basis for 8 weeks until people from all walks of life end up in lockstep with each other, perfectly highly disciplined fighting machines ready to do anything anybody tells them to do because you're taught not to question orders. So you get people with an event like 9/11 right out of high school, and all of a sudden everybody's joining the military, you know, because we want to do our patriotic duty and protect our country. And then the one thing that everybody forgets, and I'm going to put this up on the screen again, is this right here, 5:20 p.m. Building 7 collapsed at free fall speed. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the smoking gun that this whole thing was one big fat fraud right from the beginning. Inside job. But I didn't realize, I didn't come to that conclusion on September 11th, 2001. Like everybody else, I bought whatever was coming off of that TV. I believed it. And as a prior service third generation Army guy, as patriotic as they come, I would have never accepted what we're going to talk about this evening in 2001. In fact, I did not accept it for 5 years. I became a missionary in 2004 and was privileged to travel to about a dozen countries during that time that I was serving as a multimedia missionary, where I would get entrenched with missionaries and do what they did and document what they were doing on video to create videos to help them raise support and awareness. So I was heading to Kazakhstan in 2006. And on this flight, it's like a 14-hour flight to Kazakhstan, the people behind me for like the whole 14 hours were talking about Michael Moore's film, Fahrenheit 9/11. And I am not a Michael Moore fan. And I didn't, I bought hook, line, and sinker, the official story. So they were going blah, 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 9/11's inside job, yada, yada, blah, 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 for 14 hours. And I am fuming mad. It was everything I could do not to turn around and rip their throats out. I mean, that's what I wanted to do. That's how angry I was, the whole flight. Went into military mode. When I got to Kazakhstan, turned all that off, did my job. And then on the flight back home, I had 14 hours to think about everything I did in Kazakhstan, but also to think about the people who were behind me. And so when I got home, if for no other reason than to prove them wrong in my own mind, I decided to do some research because I was determined. These guys are stupid. They're idiots. How dare they? Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to prove them wrong. So I rented 2 movies, Fahrenheit 9/11 by Michael Moore, which I hated, and was yelling at this TV and wanted to blow up the TV. But I also rented another one called Fahrenheit 9/11. Fahrenheit was meant to debunk Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit calmed me down a little bit, but it didn't solve the problem. It didn't answer my questions. In fact, it left me with more questions. So that's when I started researching on my own, and at that time, boy, you got to give it to Dylan Avery because he was one of the first people out there who was brave enough to put something out on the public scene, and he put out Loose Change, which is sort of the entry video for a lot of people, I think. And when I watched Loose Change, everything changed for me. It was a massive paradigm shift of my whole reality, of everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I believed, everything that this country represented to me as third-generation patriotic Army guy, Boy Scout, and all that stuff. And that's a deep rabbit trail. I mean, as soon as that was the beginning of just kind of licking the red pill. Ooh, that's weird. I took a little lick, then I one video after another, finally found myself involuntarily shoving that red pill down my throat and swallowing it, and I couldn't go back after that. And very shortly after that, I started writing and talking on my own about all this stuff, and it was quite a journey from 2006 to 2012, with a lot of writing in between, especially in 2011, and that led to the writing of my first and publishing of my first book, Babylon Rising, The First Shall Be Last, which Leonard endorsed on the back cover. Thank you very much. This book right here kind of really lays out my journey from a research perspective, kind of point by point, looking at the evidence and stuff like that. But I'll stop right there, and we can go from there.
Yeah, if I could just real quick, I want to plug that book and Leonard's film. If you haven't seen Leonard's first film, you need to go see it. And if you have not read Babylon Rising, you need to go read it. I would say those are, like, for me at least, those were 2 of the most essential pieces for me putting my worldview, well, disassembling my worldview, and then helping me put it back together.
Thank you.
one thing I'd like to say is that again, we started off this podcast, videocast, with talking about why 9/11 is so important today, and I'm telling you all right now that the same characters that were responsible for 9/11 almost 15 years ago this fall are hard at it right now in 2015. For example, Victoria Nuland of the United States government is busy trying to arrange the situation in the eastern Ukraine against the Russians, who aren't innocent. And that's another whole other story. But the point is, Victoria Nuland is trying to maintain the value of the petrodollar by making sure that Russia loses access to the demand for gas in Europe. And Victoria Nuland is married to, let's see in my notes here, Robert Kagan. Robert Kagan was part of a fascist think tank called the Project for the New American Century, which published a white paper in September 2000. I said September 2000, that will be 1 full year before 9/11. And they said that the 21st century is going to be America's century, but that would probably trouble some of America's allies, quote, absent a catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. And in case you might think, well, that's not enough to motivate me to, make it appear sinister, the report goes on and starts talking about how, quote, biological agents can be transformed from the realm of science fiction to a politically useful tool. And in context, they actually said race-specific bioweapons. That's a quotation from the document. Now, Robert Kagan is, like I said, married to Victoria Nuland, and Victoria Nuland was speaking to the Ukraine USA or Ukraine America Foundation. The exact name doesn't really matter because it's all a CIA front, just one of many. And imagine this, she's on camera speaking in front of this totally artificial group. And behind her, and you can type this up on YouTube, is a backdrop that says Ukraine USA Foundation, and to her left, your right, is a chevron banner. I mean, talk about maintaining the petrodollar. And now, like I said, Putin isn't innocent. However, the same cast of characters that were responsible for creating wars back then are hard at it now. And the game, I think the game, the big picture is to have the American currency fall eventually and then replace it with a world currency. The people who are in charge of America are more than willing to sacrifice America for that greater goal.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. In fact, we just did a show recently, Leonard and I, talking about your new video, New World Order, the video. What's it called about currency? Illusion of money, right? The illusion of money. Talking about all that. I just want to go back to the events of that day, because I don't know how many of you watching us talk right now remember saying to yourself, that can't happen. I mean, when you're watching a building fall at free fall speed, disintegrating into its own basement, into a pile of ash, that can't happen. I was, like I said, I was in aviation. And I remember one day in particular, this was in Massachusetts, we would have to do these fuel checks. And what that basically meant in the wintertime, especially, is you would go underneath the aircraft with this little tool and a jar, and you'd pop open, you'd put it in and twist it, and it would open up the fuel cell to drain a sample into the jar to make sure there was no water condensation or anything like that in the fuel. Now, jet fuel is highly combustible. I mean, obviously, it makes the thing fly, right? It's very flammable, and it has a very fast flash point. I mean, boom, it goes up. And we were always taught when I went through flight school and everything, even though we had these Nomex flight suits and all that stuff, that Velcro, static electricity, could set off, ignite jet fuel. Well, I'm underneath this aircraft, and I put that thing in there, and I twist it, and it locked open. It stayed open, and I got drenched in jet fuel, just soaking wet underneath a helicopter, soaked in jet fuel in the wintertime, where like you just kind of move your arms together and you got static electricity, you know. So I'm freaking out because I remember all the classes that I took, watching people go up in flame and all the trauma, you know, and all that, as they taught us about jet fuel and the dangers of it and how to handle it and whatnot. So I'm laying under this aircraft getting soaked in jet fuel. I rolled out from under the aircraft, and it was a fair distance from where I was on the flight line to the hangar. And I had to get there without igniting myself with any kind of friction or static electricity. So if you can imagine me in this green flight suit looking exactly like Gumby, with my arms straight out, my legs straight out, and I'm kind of walking like, you know, Gumby to get to the hangar as quickly as I could so that I could go in there and go inside the power wash station and drench myself with water. I was absolutely terrified that I was going to be a human candlestick. And so that's burned in my head. You know, I'll never forget it. So when I saw the planes hit the building, I knew that jet fuel went up, boom, like that. I mean, it ignited instantly, and it burned up pretty close to instantly, too. That big fireball you saw, that was the jet fuel. Gone. After that, that quick flash of burning jet fuel was very short. All you had left was office fires. And they were cool burning office fires. If you remember, the dark smoke, black smoke, is an indication of an oxygen-starved fire. So it was cool fire, if I could use that phrase. It was definitely nowhere near the heat of burning jet fuel, and certainly nowhere near the heat necessary to weaken, never mind melt, steel. All right. So, I mean, if you remember, there were people standing in the opening where the plane hit, with the black smoke going over their head. And then you see pictures, you know, some of you will remember people jumping out of the building, committing suicide, because they didn't want to burn to death. So, you know, you're looking at this thing, and in the video 9/11 Anatomy of a Great Deception, the guy shows how numerous, I mean, hundreds of buildings have been on fire over the last couple of decades, and some lasting for days. High-rise buildings on fire for days. These buildings are all still standing. The only time in the history of the planet that a steel building fell as a result of fire was on 9/11. And it wasn't just one, it was 3. One of them wasn't even hit. So they're saying, okay, you know, you kind of think, well, a plane hit it, so maybe it weakened the infrastructure. Well, on Loose Change and several other videos out there exposing the fraud of 9/11, and 22 minutes is a video I put together. You could look it up on YouTube, exposing the fraud of 9/11 in 22 minutes. And basically what I did with that is I took clips from several different 9/11 videos and just kind of put them all together to tell sort of a condensed story that all these other guys were telling in their longer documentaries. Shows the original construction of that building, and step by step, and it shows the inner core of that building. I mean, it is a tight grid box construction core of a steel box core going up the middle, and then you had the outer shell of the building. And the architects, in fact, there's an interview from one of the architects of the building that was shot in January 2001. And he was basically saying that the way that was constructed, it's like a screen, like your screen door. You could poke a pencil through the screen, but it's not going to disintegrate the door. All you're going to do is have a hole in the mesh. And that was the building was intentionally designed to withstand the impact of the largest jet airliner at the time this building was made. So there's no way the impact caused it, and there's no way the jet fuel caused it. And if the pancake theory, because Popular Mechanics came out and did a video trying to debunk the debunkers, so, and they put this ridiculous video showing how the structure was weakened when the plane came through, and the steel began to melt, and it weakened the whole thing, and then the floor collapsed onto the next floor, and it just pancaked down. Well, okay, first of all, the laws of physics say that each time it comes down, it should find resistance, which should slow the fall, first of all. Second of all, in the actual PBS and Popular Mechanics debunkumentary, if I can use that laughable term, they showed the pancake theory coming down, and even in their animation, the center box core was still left. So they showed all the floors come down, but what's left? The core. Okay, well, how come on 9/11 the core wasn't left? How come when, if you watch, I forget which tower it was, but one of them, the top started to go first? Okay, so the laws of physics say the top of that thing should have just continued and fall off, just poof, fall off. Well, no, it started to fall like this, then it corrected itself, and then it completely disintegrated with the whole rest of the building as it went down. So even in the pancake theory, the top of the building should have still been there like a pile driver going all the way down. But and that's not what we saw. We saw something that defied common sense, that defied logic, that defied the laws of physics, and yet we were, because of trauma-based mind control, we believed that jets hitting a building and office fires caused that to happen. And then Building 7, which everybody forgets, there were news anchors in the BBC talking about that Building 7 had already fallen, and as she's talking, right behind her is Building 7 still standing. That showed foreknowledge. That showed a script. When you realize that all media in this country, print, radio, television, is owned by 6 Luciferian-owned companies, it becomes really easy to understand how they use the media as a propaganda machine to brainwash us. And that's exactly what happened. They show these images, they show people jumping out of buildings, they show all kinds of traumatic things all day long, and we're in shock. And then, and I got to show this clip. This is over the top for me. Harley Man is what he's become known as. Now, this is what the clip I'm about to show you was actually live. Okay, this was shot during the events of 9/11, and they're getting interviews with different people on the street, and you know, we saw this, we saw that, blah blah blah. Okay, listen to this knucklehead and ask yourself, does anybody talk like this?
Claiming that raging jet fuel fires melted the steel inside the Twin Towers.
I saw this plane come out of nowhere and just ream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
Marlene Davis is the Dean of Architecture at the University of Tennessee. She calls the 110-story tall twin tower tube structures. That means there are no internal columns holding it up.
You know, when we saw this yesterday, people said, oh my goodness, there was a bomb on there. There must have been a bomb that collapsed. Must have been a bomb below. Right, that finished the job. Well, it turns out we heard from experts who said that, you know what, the fire on those floors, probably 1,500 degrees. Steel can only withstand so much because the steel structure that holds the building up was on the outside, and essentially the building started to melt and it gave way and it toppled.
Steel will melt.
No steel building has ever been destroyed by fire.
Yes, I know the word steel was spelt wrong. Okay, immediately they're brainwashing you right there. But that Harley guy, you know, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense. Nobody talks like that. I mean, if we were in a movie theater watching this, we would say this is the worst script ever written, and these actors should like go into some other business because they're clearly not gifted enough to be actors. Okay, and then later we are told that the proof of the whole thing, that this was done by allegedly done by terrorists, is this right here.
CBS's Jim Stewart in Washington has been tracking events all day and has the latest. Jim?
We're told rescue workers have recovered a passport and the debris. It belonged to one of the dead hijackers.
Another development on Saturday, New York officials revealed at a news conference here in the city that a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
Well, Dan, not far from here, a passerby found the passport of one of the hijackers. Evidence this disaster scene is also a crime scene.
These passports are so magical and so wonderful that, like Gollum's ring, they call to you. They call to who they want to find them, but not any normal mortal. No. The ring calls out only to FBI agents. So the magical Thor's hammer material passports go out of the building, down to the ground, and then once they're on the ground in feet of dust and millions of papers everywhere, the FBI that day finds not one but two of the shards of Thor's hammer. And again, it calls out to them psychically, and they go to it and they have it.
All right. The only... Oh, man.
Nothing like a little Alex Jones to lighten it up.
The only reason we bought that freak show of information is because we went through trauma-based mind control. That's the only reason. But years later, when we kind of had time to think like rational human beings again, I would challenge anybody, if you don't think the way we're talking about, if you don't believe that it's an inside job or anything like that, shut this video off and do some of your own research, okay? Just start researching for yourself. Because if I tell you, or if Leonard or any of these other guys tell you, we're just a bunch of conspiracy, tinfoil hat wearing nut jobs. But if you look it up and you figure it out for yourself, well, then you're going to call yourself a nut job as you look in the mirror going, oh, wow, I just took the red pill.
Yeah, for those of our audience who are watching this and say, well, you guys are just a bunch of amateurs, you can't prove anything that you're saying, ask yourself the following question. How many times do certain politicians and certain reporters have to lie to you before you get it? Brian Williams comes up with this Johnny Rambo story. Yeah, my chopper got hit with an RPG and I, killed a bunch of Durkas and whatever. And then Barack Obama says, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan repeatedly, at least 12 times. And then one of the architects of the Obama healthcare plan was videotaped on 4 different occasions saying that the legislation was deliberately complicated to pull the wool over the eyes of the, quote, stupid American public. That was his term, okay? So again, how many times do people have to lie to you arrogantly and obviously before you realize maybe there's something going on here? And back to Rob's point earlier with the popular mechanics issue, people have to know 2 things. Number one, the editor of that article, 9/11 Lies, Debunking 9/11 Lies by Popular Mechanics, was written by the nephew of Michael Chertoff, who was part of the Chertoff group specializing in airport security. And you had to get all these microwaves, literally microwaves, to scan you, which became totally useless because voids inside your jacket became black. So you could have whatever you wanted in between you and your jacket, and it would just simply show up black. So these airport scanners conveniently made Mr. Chertoff millions of dollars through his group, and his nephew is the editor of that article, debunking 9/11 lies. So again, you're being played deliberately by reporters and politicians. So you got to ask yourself the question, how many times do I need to get lied to before I start to question the official story?
Exactly. Hey, Leonard, I got to show you something. I don't know if you've been aware of this or not, but our last show that we did together, we talked about just Googling global security management or something. I forget what it was, whatever it was regarding ISIS. If you just Google that, it took you to a site, and the proof is people can go watch the archive of the show that I did with Leonard just like a couple of weeks ago, and I showed you live on the air. I showed you the actual website that it went to. Look what they changed it to. They're missing an eye all of a sudden since our last show.
For the record, I have to verify Rob's story because he showed me, and I saw the ISIS paramilitary organization / Black Ops military organization. This is proof right now. I'm watching proof of deliberate propaganda and propaganda changes because people are getting wise to all this. I'm speechless, Rob. I mean, you made a good find, even better now. This is stunning.
Yeah, somebody, I guess they were trying to, I always tell people, don't believe a thing I say, research it. Search it out for yourself. And so when we did that last broadcast, somebody said, I'm going to check it out for myself. So they did. They went there and they saw this, and they said, Rob, check this out. So they sent me there, but they haven't gone through the whole site yet. They still have ISIS right here and a few other places, ISIS management right here. So they've still got to go through their website and do a little more cleaning up. But the home page has been, at least an attempt has been made on the home page anyway.
Wow, I'm stunned. I mean, this shows how sloppy things are getting, because if you constantly spew lies, you need to maintain your lies with more lies, and you end up tripping up on your own lies. It's just proof of this.
Speaking of, if anybody finds me dead, don't believe the suicide note. Okay? We put ourselves out there sometimes talking about this stuff, and just fair warning, if anything happens to any of these 4 guys on this broadcast right now, whoever is listening to this, know that something happened, and they pulled a Bill Cooper on us or something. I'm just going to plead the blood of Jesus, and no weapon formed against me shall prosper. All right. But I mean, look, I didn't make this stuff up. Anybody can go check it out for yourself. I'm just a messenger. I'm just a researcher. I'm just looking around going, hey, isn't that interesting? That's weird. Check that out. All right. But, if anything happens, don't believe the suicide note.
Yeah, I do have to get on to 2 flights back to home. So I think ISIS and CSIS and Homeland Security already know that. So for the record, I've never contemplated suicide. I just love my life. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, did you hear about the guy, the filmmaker who's making that show, the Gray State, I think it was called? All of a sudden, he committed suicide and killed his whole family and dog or something too. It's like, seriously, really, wow.
Yeah, I was thinking about contributing to that, the making of that movie, because it's looking like it was going to be really good, well produced, and like you said, to do that, I mean. Really? I mean, you're about to put out the project you've been thinking about for years. I mean, Rob, you're very much aware of this. I mean, why would you do that just before you're thinking about producing Seed? That was his project, right? I can't imagine you doing that. I can't imagine him doing that. I can't understand that.
Yeah, and all his friends said, this guy was so full of life. He was so excited. I mean, he was, on the verge of some breakthrough, and really ready to go into production and the whole deal. So I mean, this is, anybody who's trying to put together a movie or a television series or anything like that, it's a huge undertaking, massive undertaking. And when you finally get that breakthrough and it's about ready to happen, you might be stressed out, but you're anything but suicidal. You are like excited. You're jacked out of your mind. The dream is finally manifesting. You're about ready to go into production. Yeah, okay. I mean, come on. Seriously? And when it comes to what we're talking about here, look, I'm not talking about anything new here. I'm showing you websites that have been up for a long time. I'm showing you videos that have been out for a long time. There are guys out there who've done way more actual research. I mean, they went and started from scratch and put this stuff together. I'm coming along as a researcher. I'm researching what has been searched by others before me and seeing things that are already done and telling you about it. And I hope you'll do the same thing. I hope you'll take what we're saying and go look these things up for yourself. Start watching those videos. Start asking questions. Because here we are, 2015 for crying out loud. And you still got people out there believing the official story. I posted something the other day. I said, I don't know any serious researcher who still believes the official story. I don't know anybody who spends 20 minutes tops. Okay? 20 minutes. That's it. Anybody who spends 20 minutes looking into this stuff becomes a convert. Because you can't deny the evidence. So, and somebody's like, I posted a video, Anatomy of a Great Deception, which I think is a great introductory video. And somebody's comment on Facebook is, this guy's a moron. I said, you know what? Anybody who still believes the official story is a moron. Okay?
Right. So, I mean, just let's think about it like this way, because we have a lot of patriotism, as you said yourself. You had patriotism yourself as, a member of these armed services and everything. And, we hold our country, to our hearts here in the country, and we wrap our Bibles up in the American flag, et cetera, et cetera. But how far off is it to say, just for example here, if something like this happened in communist Russia, like by some dictator, would that be too hard to believe that they did that to their own people?
No, absolutely not. And I'm glad you brought that up because I was in China on one of my missionary trips. I think it was 2009, maybe. No. Anyway, it was sometime between 2006 2009. I forget what year it was. And I had just gone to Tiananmen Square and the Forbidden City. And, of course, we have what happened in our memory, on Tiananmen Square a number of years ago. And while I was there, standing under the big painting of Ho Chi Minh there, and I'm taking video of, is that his name? I just went blank there. Is that? I think that's his name. Anyway, the Chinese dictator, whatever his name was. I'm standing underneath the picture, and I'm seeing all these Chinese troops marching by, and I'm there to document what's going on there. So I'm thinking, oh, this is a great shot, So I got my camera out, and I intentionally bought a small consumer camera, so I didn't, instead of bringing all my big production equipment, I didn't want, hey, look at me, I figured, I'm just stupid American tourist, but I figure I'm getting some good shots here, with the Forbidden City there and Chinese troops marching towards me. I'm really going to be able to set the stage, for communist China, right? So I'm videotaping that, and then I got into a little bit of trouble, and it was forcefully but politely asked to stop. And so I had all that fresh in my memory when I went to Wuhan, China, and I was talking to a Chinese national in a Western-style coffee shop. And he was wanting to practice his conversational English, so he saw, an American there, and he came up to me. And the rules that we had to go by were, as far as evangelism went, is you cannot actively evangelize. However, you can have a conversation if the national initiates the conversation, and as long as he allows the conversation to continue, you can continue as well. But you can't initiate. So I had all this camera equipment and stuff with me in that particular place. I did have my production equipment, so I kind of stood out in the coffee shop. And so this guy comes up to me and he says, "Hey, what's all this camera equipment? What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, well, it's my job to fly around the world and document what God is doing in foreign countries." He said, "What God is doing? What do you mean?" Boom, kicked the door open. I'm maybe I'll have a conversation with the guy. So I'm talking with this guy. Well, in the course of this conversation, he makes a statement. He says, "Well, the Chinese are a peaceful people." Now, from the propaganda that I've been fed regarding China, I'm thinking, no, you're not. You guys are murderous communists, And so, but I'm not going to say that to the guy. That was what was going on in my head. So instead, I said, "Well, so are the American people. I mean, we're a peaceful people too." And he laughed at me. He said, "No, you're not. You guys set up military bases all over the place. You're always sticking your nose in everybody's business, And he gave this laundry list of things that Americans are guilty of doing. I mean, we are the occupation everywhere. And I thought about that, and I said, I can't argue with what you just said right there, but that's not indicative of the entire population. That is our U.S. military, which is influenced by our U.S. government, which I will admit is thoroughly corrupt. And he was like, really? And I said, yeah. I said, to be fair, when you said what you said, I had a totally different thought in my mind about the Chinese people, and what that conversation said to me was that, and I've had similar conversations in Cuba and Kazakhstan and a lot of other hostile environments. Joe Blow, national, pick a country, any country, just wants to love and be loved. They want to raise a family, do their thing, make enough money to feed their family, and go about their business and harm nobody. That is the average human being on the planet. It's only governments who brainwash young kids right out of school in the military who cause all this prejudice that we see all over the place. So consequently, to answer your question, if we saw something like a 9/11 happen in China or in Russia, we'd go, of course, bunch of communists. But we're so self-righteous that would never happen here. No. We are better than everybody else. And that was the rude awakening for me, was realizing, well, as I'm going on all these rabbit trails, that all of our presidents are related to each other. At that point, the patriotism and the rock the vote and I'm one of these guys that was very political, who Leonard said it earlier. I thought that there was a political solution to a spiritual problem. We got to get Bush. Bush is our guy. He's a Christian, and I voted for that guy twice. Until I realized he's a flat-out Luciferian whose grandmother's probably related to Aleister Crowley, but that's another story. So, Jesus said, by their fruits you will know them, not by their campaign slogans, right? Not by the little Christianese that they pull out every now and then to get the Christian vote, which is nothing more than an endorsement. It's not a vote. You don't vote for anybody. If 44 presidents are all related to each other, and they're all related to one guy, King John Lackland, the signer of the Magna Carta, the creator of the Lord Mayor Nephilim Parade, which still goes through the streets every year to this day, marching Gog and Magog through the streets, that should tell you we do not have presidents of the people, for the people, by the people. We have presidents of the elite, by the elite, for the elite.
Why is Barack Obama three relations removed from Dick Cheney? I mean, my brain can't process that.
Yeah, and that was on mainstream television, where you had Dick Cheney's wife was sitting on one of the late night talk shows or whatever, and she was like, yeah, Dick's doing a family tree, whatever, and oh, what do you know it? Dick Cheney is related to Barack Obama. And then you find out later he's also related to George Bush. So you're like, okay, at some point we have to wake up and realize the whole thing's one big fat scam, and stop endorsing it. How many people have you heard, and I've said it myself, well, so-and-so is the lesser of two evils. Well, guess what? Your net result is still evil.
Well, Rob, the political solution will be given to us in 2016 by either a Bush or a Clinton, so everything will be solved.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of 9/11, when you realize that Marvin Bush was in charge of the security of the World Trade Center, and that there were all these drills and lockdowns and all these things that took place in the days leading up to 9/11, you realize the whole family is involved here. So if Jeb ends up, being our candidate, they're all Luciferians. I don't care what they say. By their fruits you shall know them. And I said it in my book. I said, if any of your candidate of choice has any affiliation with a secret society, you need to turn and run the opposite direction, because their allegiance is first to their secret society, and everything else is secondary to that. So they're not representing the will of the American people. And I've come to the conclusion, after looking at our Constitution and all that stuff, our founding documents, when it says "we the people," we the people, we used to think that represents we the people, you, me, us. When you realize it's a bunch of Luciferian secret society Illuminist guys gathered together, when they say "we the people," they're talking about themselves. We, the Luciferian elite, this is what we're going to do. And Christian country, yeah, maybe, we have a fair percentage of Christians in this country, and Pilgrims and Puritans may have been Christians, sure. Founding fathers as in George Washington and, Jefferson, those guys, and Ben Franklin, with bodies under his kitchen, in the Hellfire Club. Sorry, guys. By their fruits you shall know them. It's not adding up. I mean, go to the George Washington Freemason temple in Washington, D.C., and just see who the father of our country was worshiping. And at that point, all these things, all these paradigms are breaking, they're crashing all around me, and I'm going, it seems like everything I was taught was a lie, and it really goes back to 9/11, and actually, they kind of shot themselves in the foot with this, because they did so much crazy, dramatic things that don't make sense, that for any thinking person, as soon as they finally start thinking and stop reacting as emotional trauma-based mind control drones, they begin to realize that the whole thing is a scam. So I think the awakening that we do have of so-called truthers, and even that, I had somebody come up to me I was at a major prophecy conference, and I played that James Corbett clip on 9/11. And I am not silent about this. I'm pretty public about my opinion on all this stuff. And so when it was over, I had this guy, probably a World War II vet, I'd guess, by his age and attitude. And I try to be sensitive to veterans, because I understand. Third-generation Army guy, I get it. And for an Army guy or any of the armed services guys to think that they fought in vain, that they fought for corporations, that they didn't fight for freedom and the whole rah-rah, the patriotism that we all believe, and for the flag, which represents Osiris and blah, 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 it's anathema to them. It's painful to them. So I get that, and I try to handle that situation with kid gloves as best I can, but this guy got all in my face. He's like, "You one of those truthers, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, sir, yeah, because the alternative is to be a liar." So I'm liar or truther. I'm going to go with truther.
Actually, if I were in your position at that point, I would have referred him to War is a Racket by Smedley Butler. What is the highest military award you can earn in America? In the military?
It's not the Silver Star, maybe. I think there's one above that.
Yeah, that's right. Well, whatever the award is, he won that award twice. Okay, after his death, he was the only American to achieve that level twice, and he wrote a very compact book before World War II, saying that war is a racket. It's the oldest trick. He called himself a gangster for capitalism. He said that, Smedley Butler said that he was there to pacify the Caribbean for major fruit corporations before they became rebranded as Chiquita Banana, just like the Mujahideen became rebranded and became Al-Qaeda, which became rebranded and became ISIS. They just keep changing the names. It's the same thing. Because you've got the best enemy is the one that you control. Because then you can make money destroying something, rebuilding it, and destroying it again. And if you want a case in point, just look at Iraq. I mean, Iraq is about spending lots of money on behalf of the military-industrial complex and controlling oil to jack up the price, because Saddam was flooding the market and the cost of a barrel of oil was nothing. And Saddam did something that, in spite of all that, was the absolute no-no. He wanted to sell his oil in euros. That was a direct threat to the American petrodollar, which is exactly why we are in conflict right now with Russia. And I've explained this to Sam and Dan before. The average Westerner must understand this. It would be like, okay, the eastern Ukraine is to Russia what Washington State and Oregon and California are to America. Without those three states, there is no east-west connection. Okay, without the eastern Ukraine, there is no east-west connection for Russia. Russia must maintain access to the West through the Ukraine. So America, well, again, I'm not tar and feathering America. The powers that control America want control of the Ukraine as another trophy in their chest. But I'm telling you right now, the Russian bear will do whatever it takes to maintain control of that region, which is an extremely dangerous situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, all of global politics changed on 9/11, and it took that event for the Patriot Act to come to be, for the was NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, which basically like shredded the Constitution and threw out the Bill of Rights to the point where they can literally do whatever they want, whenever they want, and they can define terrorism any way they want to. So whatever they decide is terrorism for that day, you are a terrorist. You wore purple today. You're a terrorist because purple is the color of terrorism today. You talked about the war on terror earlier, and I made mention of that in my book. That and this is the reason why a lot of people debate when it comes to eschatology, who or what are the four horses of the apocalypse, the horsemen, and blah blah blah. I postulate the idea that the second horseman, the rider of the red horse, is George W. Bush, because the red horse strips peace from the earth forever, and he has a great sword in his hand. And in my opinion, that's all it is. It's not "Thus saith the Lord," it's "Thus thinketh Rob." My opinion is that the war on terror is the name of that sword, because it effectively stripped peace from the earth forever. It is not a war against a people group or a nation. It's a war against an idea conjured up in a Luciferian's mind that will never end. Furthermore, it is a war that will only perpetuate war. War is terror, so how do you wage terror to get rid of terror? And all you do is go to somebody's house who had nothing to do with anything, you kill a bunch of people there, right? Now, if somebody comes to your house and whacks your wife and your kids and everything else and kills you for something you didn't do, had nothing to do with it, then, and you survive, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to seek revenge. So all we're doing is creating terrorists by being terrorists. We're knocking down doors and killing people who had nothing to do with 9/11. And we've been doing it for how many years now? In how many countries now? Peace is gone. Peace is gone forever. They have effectively created a masterful plan that will rob peace from the earth forever. And that's why I say there's no better candidate in my mind anyway. If I look at the description of the second horse of the apocalypse, than the actions of George W. Bush. Now, I'm not laying it all on Bush, because it took a Clinton for a Bush to happen. It took a Bush for an Obama to happen. Each one of these Luciferians are building upon the work of the previous one. And Judge Napolitano, I think, said it best. There's no difference between Democrat and Republican. They're two wings in the same bird of prey. One is simply going to advance the plan perhaps faster than the other, but they each are going to advance the plan. And that's why I came up with in the chapter in my book called The Omega Plan, and it's a question mark. I put Omega Plan question mark because I am asking questions. I am simply looking at a chronological order of events and saying this appears to be a plan set in motion. And the catalyst was 9/11.
Right, and you just said both parties are the same thing, and it's interesting if you just kind of, I think even the average Joe who doesn't even really study politics can just look at the situation and go, well, what's really the fundamental difference between a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or a conservative, however you define that? And really all I see, and you guys can add into this if you want, but all I see is one's for abortion, one's not, and one's for gay rights and one's not. And those seem to be the big, huge issues without, some of the fiscal issues, but none of them are questioning the Federal Reserve. None of them are doing anything in that realm. It is definitely the same, like you just said, two wings of the same bird.
Everybody talks about the abortion issue and how many millions of babies are killed every year or whatever. Human sacrifice. Yes, that is human sacrifice. That is the preferred type of human sacrifice that the Democrats seem to love. The Republicans seem to love sacrificing older children, teenagers, because war is human sacrifice, and that's exactly what it is. So, and historically speaking, both have been guilty of being presidents in time of war and causing wars and whatnot. But it seems like the Republicans are usually the ones that lead that march and sacrifice our older children, while the Democrats are happy to sacrifice the younger children. But either way, you got blood sacrifice.
I first heard of the name ISIS about 2.5 years ago, and I bust a gut in a sick outburst because I said, how obvious does it have to get to have this Babylonian archetype to be in your face, this ISIS character which is drunk on the blood of the saints? Mm-hmm. And again, just because it's not in America's face, it doesn't make the news. But as I was saying to Sam and Dan previously, during my trip down here, I'm starting to get reports now of alleged plans for Muslim extremism, ISIS, whatever you want to call it, to attack shopping malls in America. And I said, well, that's it. That's the next stage in this whole war on terror, which is to bring the war front home and to have it in your face to justify the clampdown, because as I will make it abundantly clear from a variety of perspectives in my second film, The Illusion of Money, the elite know that every nation has a life cycle. Every product has a life cycle. Every movie has a life cycle. Every book has a life cycle. America is at the end of its life cycle. So the elite are front-running that trend and are basically, they're popping the governor on the carburetor or fuel injectors, they're ramming that engine, and they can't wait for America to fall. They're using America as that plow. And they want to maintain control by increasing the appearance of things getting out of control because, for example, how is it that the current president of the United States' half-brother, Malik Obama, in Egypt, is the financier to the Muslim Brotherhood? And not one media outlet, not even Fox News, the so-called right-wing part of the propaganda spectrum, will touch that. And the only answer to that question, and again, I found that asking the right question gives you the answer that you're looking for. The only answer to that question that I can think of is because this was planned. And if you don't believe that, ask yourself another question. How is it that ISIS got its hands on so much grade A military equipment? All these up-armored Humvees, these Toyota Tundra trucks, Stinger missiles, tanks, choppers, everything. Grade A military equipment. Did the United States government / NATO turn a blind eye to all the satellite coverage that I'm sure they knew about? It had to be planned. So this whole war on terror is going to be in our face, unfortunately. And I think America is, like I said, it's being run to the ragged edge because the big prize is peace and safety, like the Bible says. And we're just creating the stage for the man of sin to be revealed and promise us things like he promised Adam and Eve which were all lies. So the lies continue.
Yeah. You know, why is it that the CIA and the government and military, with all of the state-of-the-art equipment that we have at our disposal, couldn't find Osama bin Laden during that season? Yet on the day before 9/11, if I remember the chronology right, he was in a U.S. Hospital for undergoing dialysis treatment. The Bush family are good friends with the bin Laden family. They're like in bed with the bin Laden family. So, you know, CNN reporters can set up shop in the tent with Osama bin Laden, no problem. But yeah, we can't find him, right? You talked about ISIS. You know, Obama is going around at the time, you know, a few months back or whatever, saying we don't have a plan yet, we don't have a strategy yet. And I'm like, they should have called me, because I was just sitting there looking at all of the footage of these brand new Toyotas in this nice, neat, long convoy for all these photo ops that kept showing up everywhere. It's like on every magazine cover, newspaper, and blog site or whatever, you saw this long convoy of these knuckleheads, you know, with bandanas sitting on top of brand new Toyotas in this long convoy. And I'm going, ooh, Mr. Carter, Mr. Carter. You know, those of you guys probably don't remember that either. A lot of the people watching this, but I'm like, I got the answer. A-10, the A-10 Warthog. One good A-10 run with napalm would have taken care of the whole problem. I love the smell of napalm in the morning, right? One good strafing run. I mean, the front of the A-10 has a Vulcan Gatling gun on the front of it that goes, and with that sound, about 1,000 rounds of ammunition just went downrange. So all you have to do is wait for the next photo op, get one A-10 with a Vulcan and some napalm, and you just solved the ISIS problem. Nobody called me. I don't know what the deal is. Really frustrating.
But in the meantime, I go through the airport. Oh, by the way, because of the 30-hour delay getting from one plane to the other, I had to cross the U.S.-Canadian border twice in the same day and go through 4 virtual strip searches and 20 questions. And I'm going, like, is this worth it? Is this my freedom?
Well, you know, there was a UFO, so.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, too. You mentioned freedom. You know, a lot of people who have a hard time taking that red pill will say, well, what's the motive? You know, and I say, well, all you have to do in any situation is look, first of all, follow the money, and then look to see who has the most to benefit. Are towel-headed, you know, primitive people living in caves going to benefit from us totally bombing the snot out of them with state-of-the-art military equipment? Or is a Luciferian government hell-bent on controlling everything going to benefit from it? And the fact that this conversation is being monitored, hello, hi, how you doing? How you doing?
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, you know, why don't you grow a conscience? Why don't you get saved, all right? Why don't you ask Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior, all right? Why don't you switch sides? Because you're playing on the losing team right now. And if you claim to be an American, you're supposed to be looking out for the interests of the American people, all right? Why is it that all of us are being monitored? If we are supposedly were attacked by Muslim terrorists, why did the U.S. government allow a Muslim to be a U.S. president? If it's supposedly Muslims that attacked us, why did the government allow a Muslim to be sitting in the Oval Office? And let's just call it as it is. He is not a Christian. You know, all evidence proves that Barack Hussein Obama is a Muslim. All right? You know, he even said it himself when he's on one interview and he says, my Muslim faith, blah, 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 and the guy corrects me. He goes, oh, you mean your Christian faith? He goes, oh, yeah, my Christian faith. Never in my 38 years of being a Christian would I have ever made that slip of the tongue. Ever. All right? You know,
well, you know, in his defense, Obama was at Rick Warren's church, and he said live on TV and to the congregation that, you know, he doesn't believe in the sanctity of life. And he also said in another interview that he attended this radical left-wing, I guess, black liberation theology church where the pastor says GD America for 20 years, but he never was able to recall a sermon.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the lies have never ended, and basically, on one level, it is about money, and on another level, I believe, and I have reason to believe, that 9/11 was really an occult sacrifice, because these people that attend Bohemian Grove and grow up in Skull and Bones and you name it, they are Luciferian. They honestly believe that Satan is the good guy, giving them knowledge and power, and that Jesus, who they believe is Satan's brother, is the bad guy because he's a control freak. Take everything you know and turn it upside down. And, you know, basically, these people are into spilling blood.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no other way to say it. And the average Christian might think that's a little bit over the top, but I will tell you that the average Christian should be aware that there was an incident where the Moabite king went up against the Israelites, and he was going to be defeated, and the Moabite king was willing to sacrifice his own son to achieve victory over the Israelites, and the Bible says that he received that victory and that his army was demonically charged. And when I look at ISIS, no matter how much of an inside group they may be, I still see that. These videos are disgusting. Some of them are fake, some of them are real, but the effects that are going on right now in the Middle East are very real, and that is coming home to America. And so that's the next thing I expect to see in this war on terror. But there's a final phase, and nobody has discussed this yet. I truly believe that somehow Christians will be blamed for the war on terror because they are not conducive to understanding other cultures, and they're intolerant. And so in the end, the Christian community will be blamed for the war on terror, and will be easily rounded up in the name of peace and safety and tolerance.
Well, you know, other than the fact that we try to tell people we're a Christian nation, you know, so there's sort of this label, America. You know, if you look on a map, you know, this area is colored such and such a color, and they're Buddhist, and this color they're you know, atheists, and this color they're Muslim, and United States of America, Christian nation. So we're the Christians going around the world occupying countries and setting up military bases and killing people who had nothing to do with 9/11, you know, or things of that nature. So in that sense, if you look at it from that perspective, then you could say, okay, yeah, Christians are just as murderous as Muslims, but that's an illusion. That's not real. That's a label that people banter around, but it has no basis in reality. Whereas people who claim to genuinely be followers of Jesus Christ, who claim to be Christians, our leader tells us to love our enemy. Our leader that we claim as our Savior tells us to pray for our enemies, turn the other cheek, you know, go the extra mile, give our cloak, you know, all these things. So a true born-again Christian is not a murderous person. And I've met a lot of Muslim people. I know a lot of people who practice Islam, and they're just as normal as the average Christian is. But there is a faction within their religion that is, and they use their book to justify it, and their prophet, who was a murderer, to go around killing people, while telling everybody it's a religion of peace. They're always saying it's a religion of peace, but why are they always beheading people? Why? I don't get it. I mean, if I was a Muslim and my Muslim brothers were going around giving my religion a bad name, I don't know about you, but I'd be getting my buddies to go and say, hey, we need to stop that guy because he's really making us look bad. If a bunch of born-again Christians were out there chopping people's heads off and being radical and blowing themselves up and stuff like that, I would hope that Christians would go and put a stop to those guys. I mean, when I see the Inquisition that is launched on me on Facebook just by simply giving the horrific suggestion that as believers in Jesus Christ as Yeshua as our Savior, it might be a good idea that we obey God. People call me a cult-leading heretic and launch an inquisition against me and post blogs and stuff like that. And if they had a rack, they'd probably put me on it.
How dare you, Rob?
Yeah.
How dare you?
I'm thinking, if Christians will be that psychotic about something like that, I would hope that if somebody in our faith started chopping people's heads off and blowing people up, that we would really get our act together and stop that so that our religion didn't have a bad name for itself. If a new Inquisition or a new crusade went up under a legitimate banner of Christianity, not a political banner of Christianity, then I would think that Christians would put a stop to it pretty quickly. So, those of you who are out there who are peace-loving Muslims, why are you not out there trying to stop those who are in your faith giving you a bad name? Because you're the only religion out there right now killing people. I can't think of any others that are. Buddhists are over there contemplating their navel and stuff, and meditating and doing yoga and stuff. And Christians are arguing on Facebook, but nobody's chopping anybody's heads off. So I didn't mean to make light. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to insult anybody, but I'm just saying. The only religion on the planet that I'm aware of right now that's chopping people's heads off and blowing themselves up are Muslims. So all of you peace-loving Muslims out there, well, you need to do something about it if you don't want people to view your religion that way.
And you brought up the beheadings, Rob, and when talking about trauma-based mind control, they keep hammering that on Fox News, fairly unbalanced, but it seems to be building to something. To me, they're intensifying it. What do you guys think about that?
About the trauma-based mind control?
Yeah, the trauma-based mind control, but specifically, what are they trying? What is the agenda that they're trying to push the beheadings to? I mean, we've talked about them bringing the terrorism home.
Yeah.
Home front, which on that note, just that tip real quick, I mentioned to Leonard the other day, there's a new television show that started this year that I've watched occasionally, but I've read up on, called State of Affairs, and that very thing is domestic homegrown terrorists. The terrorist network of that show is called Arsala. They're bombing shopping malls, monuments, the Grand Canyon, and they're college students, they're college professors. I think there's a line in there where it says, we are your friends, we are your family, we are your doctors, or something like that, along those lines. And there was a series of episodes in that show where they interrogated a Muslim professor, okay, because he was opening students' minds to the possibility of terrorism and such. Well, the CIA overstepped and broke the law and interrogated him when they shouldn't have, allegedly. But the whole time you're pulling for, as the viewer, hey, he needs to do what he needs to do in order to make sure everyone's safe and to stop them. And they're sucking you in with this, and then they have the audacity to go further, and 3 episodes later, oh look, he actually was a terrorist and he was justified, even if it didn't seem like it at the time. So anyway, I kind of went on a rant there.
Something that's confusing to me is, on the one hand, you have the Auroras and the Boston bombing and the Sandy Hook and all that stuff and this big gun grab. this whole, we got to get the guns off the street. So you got this routine going on over here, and then at the same time you got this other routine that they're running, trying to get us to say, ISIS is going to come across the border any day now, and I can only imagine if they decided to do that in Texas. Everybody's packing here, man. So I don't see anybody here afraid of that. You know what I mean? If a bunch of yahoos came through town in new Toyotas, I can't imagine too many Texans allowing that to go very far.
Well, here's the thing, Rob. You should know that you don't need to control the entire shareholder base of a corporation to take control of that corporation.
Mm-hmm.
I think the average percentage is about 15%. And you pretty well have the majority of the voting shares in a corporate meeting. So ISIS, whatever you want to call them, doesn't need to take control of all of America to essentially, steer it to the way that they want to. And I can see how this war on terror will be used to justify more economic warfare in the Middle East. And it's fascinating to me to read the Bible and has very specific prophecy like Damascus will be an utter heap of ruins. And know that Damascus is the world's oldest continuously inhabited city. It's unique, and it's named, and the mode of destruction is accurately described. So I'm watching the situation in Syria, and I'm thinking to myself, well, it may not go up in a nuclear fireball tomorrow, but the tension sure is high, and it's never been so high in generations. So we live in interesting times, and our hope is not in this world, that's for sure.
Absolutely, and that's why I tell people, turn your television off. Okay. It is a terribly written script with horrible actors, and as soon as you wean yourself off of that mess, I mean, I'm talking maybe a month or two, just go on a fast, all right, for at least 1 month. Just don't look at any news report, none, zero, even your local news. Don't watch it. Watch how everything changes for you. Watch how your whole outlook on life, your stress level goes down, your blood pressure goes down. Everything will change if you just turn that mess off. And then the next thing you'll notice is after you have begun to get your senses back and become a reasonable human being again, capable of rational thought, you will walk by other people at a restaurant or a store or office or whatever, and watch them watching the news, and you will see that they are brainwashed. If you get weaned of the brainwashing, when you watch somebody watching television, you will see that they literally are being brainwashed. There is a strategy to the way they present the news, to the way that they speak, to the way that they insert commercials. When they insert commercials, television puts literally puts your brain into, I think it's an alpha, theta, alpha something. It puts your brain literally into the equivalent of a meditative state. It's the same state that people who practice meditation, Om in the cave and all that, they get to that same kind of brain wavelength, which is an extremely susceptible, empty yourself brainwave. And so, I mean, it's entrainment. So they'll put you in entrainment. I think it takes about 7 minutes to get into entrainment. And if you look at the structure of your typical TV show, it's about 7 minutes of entrainment, and then about 3 minutes of commercials, but not enough to get you out of the entrainment, just enough to catch you while you're brainwashed. And then they put you back into another 7 minutes of entrainment, give or take. And this cycle, the Nielsen report says the average American watches, this was an old report, about 4 to 5 hours of TV a day. It's probably more than that now, but this was a few years ago. So the average American, let's say, is watching 4 to 5 hours of TV a day, and then what does it end with? The evening news. So you've been thoroughly entrained in your mind to be brainwashed to receive whatever they want to tell you. And it is a horribly written script by terrible actors designed specifically to cause reaction. You know, we're dealing with a Hegelian dialectic where they're causing problems that cause a planned reaction that they just so happen to have a planned solution for. And we continue to buy it. We continue to allow it. We have cameras everywhere. We are being monitored every time we turn around. You know, unless you take the battery out of your cell phone, they can activate this thing and monitor you right now and look at you through your camera. That's why I put a little black tape on the front of it, and I always put my camera down like that.
I noticed that.
Yeah, because they can. You know.
And actually, on the note of the cell phones, my wife's my phone, the battery is not removable. Yeah. I cannot manually remove it, and this is actually becoming a regular part of the design now.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is an iPhone. I have no clue how to take the battery out of this thing. I have no idea.
The latest report on the future of spending habits suggests that within 3 years, 25% of all transactions will be used or done through your smartphone. And Apple Pay is, of course, leading that the way in that department. But I've also noticed another trend. We started out this conversation with talking about how an entire generation has grown up after 9/11 and therefore has no emotional tie to it. There's something else that I've been noticing. The average young person / teenager today thinks that the screen is reality and that the world around them is unreal. Because I've come across another study where the average teenager now has 10 hours of screen time per day. And it took me a while to process that, and then I realized how that was possible. Because number one, they got the TV on in the background. Number two, they got the laptop in front of them. And number three, they're texting their friends. So there's 3 screens going.
Their friend is sitting right next to them.
Yeah. They can't have a normal conversation without electronics in front of them. So, again, we have to ask ourselves, how hard is it to brainwash people that think the screen is reality and everything else around them isn't?
Right, and you said, you know, Rob, you said that at the end of the day, after all this fiction that we're watching, all of a sudden comes the reality to just pull you right in. And I think I told this to Leonard yesterday, but, you know, around the time that I was going through my awakening, you know, after watching Leonard's film and a bunch of other things that I was checking out, I was just after the Boston bombing situation. I just couldn't help. I just wanted to hear the reactions of the news on the radio and just see what they were saying, because like you, Rob, I actually believe there was a political solution, and I was pulling for, come on, vote for Romney, and I actually went and voted for Romney. I was totally stoked on Romney, and it's really embarrassing now, but I mean, thank the Lord for waking me up to all these things. And so what I wanted to say was, this guy on the radio, it's the same station that has, you know, Rush Limbaugh on it and everything, the conservative station. I believe his name's like Mike Maloney or something like that, but he came on, and as we know, the right-wingers are supposed to be less government, right? Like, that's the way it works with the right-wingers and conservatives. Well, this guy, like, I just couldn't believe my ears. He goes, you know what, America? You know, if somebody couldn't say something over a couple of backpacks on the ground, if somebody didn't notice that, then maybe we deserve to have our freedoms taken away. I am so sorry that I have to say this, but maybe it's true. Maybe we have to start taking away some freedoms. Maybe we need cameras on every corner. He actually said that, and I was just, my jaw dropped to the floor, you know? It was just crazy. So you're talking about the whole level of the reality stuff, the news stuff. Can we talk for a second about just the fictitious media side, the you know, fiction, the movies, the comics, whatever there is out there? Can we talk about the effects on that? And I'd like to start, Rob, with, I believe you mentioned in Leonard and your first interview together, you mentioned the X-Files that there was some maybe hints towards something going on with this 9/11 situation. I wouldn't mind if you would kind of expound on that a little.
Yeah, I think it's the Erlenmeyer Flask episode, if I remember the title correctly. There was something at the end of it, and it escapes me right now, but it was I believe it was a door, and when the door was shut, it showed that they were in the Pentagon, and it was a Pentagon escape route exit plan picture. But it was showing basically the location of where, I mean, you're talking years later. I mean, those were back in the 90s, where the plane hit the Pentagon. But then there was a spin-off called the Smoking Gunman, I think it was the name of the series, that was spun off of the X-Files. And if the X-Files, you remember, there was a kind of group of conspiracy guys that had a little publication. I think it was called the Smoking Gunman. Anyway, they did a whole short-lived series spin-off of the X-Files with those guys. And there was an episode, and the whole plot of the episode was terrorists had hijacked a plane and they were going to slam it into, I think it was the World Trade Centers, if I remember right. I mean, it was basically what happened on 9/11, but it was like a year before, several months before 9/11 when it was out. I don't know. I mean, is it life imitating art, or is the art form, are they putting things in plain sight? I think it can be a little bit of both. Amos 3:7 says God himself says, I will not do anything except I tell my servants, the prophets, first. So if God has created a law of the universe that he has bound himself to, I'm not going to do anything without telling somebody I'm going to do it first, then Satan and his minions have to follow that same law. Because I used to ask, well, why are they they just egomaniacs, they're just getting off on this stuff, they think it's funny. Why is it that they put there's so many things telegraphing 9/11 in The Simpsons and Trading Places, all these movies, there are tons of movies that showed clocks set to 9/11. Now, I'm a filmmaker, and I've worked on movie sets. One of the really, I don't know if the most important, but one of the really important jobs on a film set is the job of the continuity person, because they'll shoot a scene if there's a couple of guys in a room talking that may end up be on movie screen for 3 minutes, if that. But it may be shot all day long because they're shooting a wide shot, establishing shot of the whole table and everybody talking, as a wide shot. Then they're doing an over Leonard's shoulder talk, to focus on me, and over my shoulder to focus on him, and a shot of your reactions, So they're doing all these multiple takes. Well, if there's a clock in the room and it's still plugged in or still has a battery in it, well, they may take this shot, of your reaction, Dan, or of Leonard talking, and then the next 10 shots, for whatever reason they didn't like, and they picked the 11th shot. If they didn't do something with that clock, the arms would be doing this. So the continuity person is the person that looks and they take pictures and notes of what everybody's wearing, where everything is on the table, because you're going to have lunch breaks and dinner breaks and all kinds of stuff in between, to make sure that the cup doesn't just, from 1 second start off here and end up over here, So that's their job, is to set the clock at whatever time they want, take the battery out, unplug it. So the fact that so many TV shows and movies had clocks specifically set to 9/11, that was intentional. Somebody did that. Somebody thought that out and made that happen. And, this whole idea of we watch fictional TV shows for 4 hours and then watch the news, we are programmed to think, well, that was fiction, this is true. And then what you end up with is the same thing that happened with this. War of the Worlds, right? Orson Welles. If you missed the first 5 minutes, and I have the original audio of this, the original radio drama that was done, and if you missed the first 5 minutes or so where they said this is a such and such production of so and so blah blah blah, disclaimer saying that the following is an audio drama by these players. If you missed that and you came home from work 5-10 minutes late, missed the disclaimer, turned on the radio, which is the source of truth for you, and you heard that broadcast, you were freaking out. You thought aliens had landed in your city, and the way they described them, they described the alien ships like the water towers. So all of a sudden you're freaking out thinking, here's my evening news telling me that there are alien ships invading American cities. You look out the window and you're freaking out because you see one of the ships walking down the street, when really all you just looked at is the water tower that's been there for 35 years. You know, welcome to Stephenville. It's been there 30 years. But now all of a sudden your brain just played a trick on you, and you're seeing that thing walking down the street, and you're freaking out. And literally, people were terrorized in the United States who listened to that broadcast, because they thought anything that came from that radio station, from that news station, is true. And so we have the same mindset. Everything that's, pick your poison, CNN or Fox or, ESPN, whatever your poison of choice is that you believe is the source of truth. No, it's another War of the Worlds audio drama. Only it's terribly written and not nearly as well performed. It's a big scam.
Yeah. On that note, Dean Haglund, who was a co-star of The Lone Gunman, has been interviewed about that episode, and he said, out of his own mouth, he said that CIA agents were suggesting plot lines to the cast and crew, and that they encouraged such things as palm reading. So right there, you've got the occult and suggested plot lines where art imitates life, all coming together, and it's just ridiculous. And Rob, you led into something quite significant there, and there's a lady that was associated with NASA. Help me out here. I think her last name was Rosen. I forget her first name, and she got quite close to Werner von Braun. And according to her, Werner von Braun's deathbed confession was that, which was, by the way, part of the Disclosure Project, which was broadcast or uploaded to the internet in the summer of 2001, just before 9/11, but it never got any traction because of 9/11. But she said something quite interesting just before 9/11. She said, the next thing in the global controllers' minds will be terrorism, and after that will be the quote-unquote alien deception. Mm-hmm. So what she said and when she said it is playing out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had, 6 seasons now, I think, of Ancient Aliens on TV propaganda, and more of these shows are coming out. And then you have other, I would say more serious researchers out there, L.A. Marzulli and others, actually making trips to Peru and stuff, and trying to figure out what in the world, or who in the world, what are these people? Why is this person's head shaped like this from birth with 25% more cranial capacity, larger brains, and all kinds of stuff like that? What is all this stuff? Well, I mean, all this has got to eventually come to a head where I have believed for some time now that all of this stuff is waiting in the wings, that it's been ready, it's been prepped, and they're just waiting for the right opportunity to pull the plug, and then boom, it's all going to come out. But I mean, it took evolution, it took the theory of evolution to topple the previous widely held belief of creationism. Okay, so evolution topples creationism, and that gets you to kind of throw or push aside God, and so it took that paradigm to get rid of the old paradigm. But this paradigm, evolution, is falling apart. I mean, even Richard Dawkins, who's sort of the mouthpiece for evolution these days, is now talking about panspermia. That the whole idea, okay, Darwinian evolution on its own, we acknowledge, it can't happen, but perhaps somebody from elsewhere came, advanced civilization, seeded our planet, maybe through scientific experimentation, gave it a kickstart so Darwinian evolution could then continue. All they did is push the problem further out in space, but it put a seed in our mind that maybe they are our creators. And what do you know? Some of the oldest texts on the planet, the Sumerian texts, talk about the Anunnaki and genetic experimentation, and then you got movies like Prometheus coming out that show, well, exactly what the Sumerian texts say about ancient aliens, so to speak, Anunnaki, blending themselves with clay and creating humans and whatnot. So, I fully expect that things will run its course to a certain point the way they are right now. It'll come to a head. This is my theory. I can't prove this. It's just my own thinking out loud here, is that things are going to come to a head. It's going to get to the point where we think it's so bad and so completely hopeless, and then they're going to pull the plug, and our alien saviors are going to show up. And then, I mean, you can't deny that our skies are being filled with weird stuff. I've seen myself several UFOs. Now, what is a UFO? It's simply an unidentified object in the air. It's an unidentified flying object. Is it from Arcturus, Orion, whatever? No, I don't think so. And I've done a show with Josh Peck, I think it was last week, talking about interdimensional beings as opposed to extraterrestrial beings. And the whole idea that all of this UFO stuff is really just repackaged Nephilim fallen angel activity. And, eventually it's going to get to the point where disclosure will happen. Whoever these entities are will reveal themselves and act as if they are our saviors. And then we're going to have a situation like the TV series V, where, they're going to offer us with all these great benefits, right? Where, they can heal us, and, that they're the solution for everything. And hey, by the way, probably at some point there's going to be this terrible pandemic that will be caused, which will cause a reaction that they'll have the solution to. Unfortunately, it'll be the mark of the beast. And, side effects include counterfeit immortality, thrown alive into the lake of fire. Ask a political leader if this is right for you. You're going to watch the disclaimer at the end of the commercial for the mark of the beast, right? It's going to have all these benefits. You'll live for 500 years. You'll never be sick again. But side effects may include, counterfeit immortality and being thrown alive into the lake of fire. Somehow, some way, what is left of biblical prophecy has got to be fulfilled. And how much longer we have until that happens, I don't know. But I'll tell you this, I'm not freaked out about it. There was a time when I was. But right now, it's just sort of to bring all of this to a kind of a close. I don't want to leave anybody scared and hopeless. For me, the call of the last days is to come out of Babylon. If Babylon is rising, and I believe it is, and it's been in operation for a long time, but it's rising to prominence, the call of the last days is to get out of it. What does that look like? What does that mean? Well, Leonard talked about it, and I've talked about it. There's lots of things in this country, in our religion and politics and everything else that are Babylonian. And, the more you learn, the more you say, well, I got to get rid of that. I got to let go of that. I got to get out of that. And ultimately, what's left is, okay, I'm getting out of Babylon. Where am I going? I'm getting out of that. What am I going to? Well, I'm hoping to walk into the kingdom, the kingdom of Yahuwah, the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the kingdom of the Lord. And in order to do that, he has house rules that he has set up. He has things he's told us to do, and he has things he told us not to do. We call them commandments. And so for me, I'm like, well, I want to get on God's page as much as possible, because that's where safety and protection is. That's where Psalm 91 is. That's where we come under the shelter of the wings of the Almighty, where 1,000 are falling at my left and 10,000 at my right, and it's not touching me. The call of the last days is to come out of Babylon. Why? So you do not partake of her plagues. Well, guess what, guys? Plagues are coming. How many news reports do we have to see? It's happening. And I believe the plagues are going to come through the very things he told us not to do. If he says, don't go there, don't do this, don't eat that, don't eat this. Well, if we decide to go there and go and do this and do that and eat this and eat that, the things he told us not to do, well, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you if you end up with the plague. Whereas I think if you do what you're supposed to do, then we have the example of the Israelites during the Exodus. As long as they were obedient, they were protected in Goshen. While God's wrath was being poured out on the land of Egypt, the lights were still on in Goshen. They weren't getting the plagues. Yeah, they experienced 3 of the 10 plagues, but the other 7, the worst of them, they were spared, contingent upon obedience, especially the last one. Put that blood on the door. If you do, your firstborn kid will live. Well, if they didn't, their firstborn kid that was not appointed unto wrath still died. And conversely, if the Egyptian, and I would have been one of the Egyptians looking over at the Israelites going, honey, I don't know what they're doing, but they killed an animal and they're putting blood on the door. I think I'm going to do what they just did. If the Egyptians did what the Israelites did and put the blood on the door just like they did, their firstborn kid lived. So for me, it's like, if I'm under the shelter of the Almighty, what do I have to fear? You know, and if I'm preserved in Goshen because I'm obedient, then I'm not going to participate in the plagues of Babylon. So my encouragement to you, whoever is listening out there, turn your television off. Stop watching the news. Open up the Bible, start with Genesis, and believe everything until you get to the end of Revelation. Okay? Everything in between, believe it. Because it's written for you. Basic instructions before leaving Earth. B-I-B-L-E. All right? It's an acronym. He gave us everything we need to know. He said, I'm not going to do anything except I tell the servants and prophets first what he's going to do. He told us what he's going to do so that we could be prepared. So there's no reason for us to be in fear. If perfect love casts out all fear. So if you're in fear, you're not walking in perfect love. So we need to get into that perfect love that it comes only through a relationship with Jesus Christ, with Yeshua, the Son of God, who shed his blood for the remission of our sins. You know, if we accept him as our Lord and Savior, then our eternal security is taken care of. Okay? After that, you got to obey him. That's where you're going to be safe. And as they say, that's all I got to say about that.
Well, if you don't mind, if I could just add a few more things into what we were talking about the TV shows aspect of, you know, like what's been planted in our heads and such. I was in high school. You know, I was exiting high school right before 9/11, so I was in my freshman year of college. And so that was that's a pretty big step in a man's life, you know, and any person's life when they're like, oh, I got to go to college now, you know, like what am I going to do, you know? And so within, you know, the first 2 weeks of that happening was really traumatic. But I was kind of like revisiting what had been thrown at my generation through the media, just in entertainment. And so some of the stuff that you mentioned. But let's go back to 1999. Released on September 10th, 1999, actually, a movie called Fight Club. A lot of people know of this movie. It ends, the ending scene, if the movie isn't, you know, crazy enough as it is, it ends with the main character, Edward Norton, holding the hand of, I don't know the woman's name, but she's Johnny Depp's wife, I believe, currently. They are watching two towers, well, they're watching an entire city basically destruct, but it just ends perfectly. These two buildings fall right before the credits, right in the center, and right where, exactly where, like, the planes hit the Twin Towers. So that's in 1999. In 2000, you have a movie that came out all about a fraternity called the Skulls, of all things. We know that our president, George W. Bush, was a member of Skull and Bones, and that there's no coincidence there. To follow that up, that came out March 31st, 2000. Then you have, in the music realm, an album by a rap group called Cypress Hill called Skull and Bones, which would have come out, you know, a month later. Of all times. And then you pointed this out, Leonard, in your first interview with Rob, which I've referenced many times on our show. And by the way, to both of you guys, that is our landmark interview that we've probably played that interview so many times. It's, yeah, the record's scratched. So basically, what Leonard pointed out in that interview really penetrated me, because he talked about the catastrophic event, such as a new Pearl Harbor. At the beginning of this, you talked about it as well. You used that quote from that. What was that from? Rebuilding America's Defense, or was it a? So anyway, he points out in your interview that, you know, what movie came out 2 months before 9/11? Pearl Harbor. Wow, weird. I specifically remember seeing that with my high school girlfriend, and that tripped me out. And then there was an album that came out probably within a month of that movie. Now, I'm not saying anything about these artists. I don't know like what their belief is. I know they're not Christians, okay? But you know, there's a band that I loved. An album came out by this band, Jimmy Eat World, called Bleed American, and that was July of 2001. And the album art, interestingly enough, has a series of trophies on top of the cigarette machine, and there's two very tall ones surrounded by a bunch of small ones. And Leonard pointed this out as I showed him the other day the album, and I'll just hold it up here, but you guys can check this out for yourself. He counted them, and there are 7 trophies, just as there are 7 buildings in the World Trade Center. Now, a coincidence maybe, I don't know. I found it very interesting that he pointed that out, and that the band, right after 9/11, they changed the album's title just to Jimmy Eat World as a self-titled album. So that was very, very interesting. And the last of all the albums and movies that I will bring up is an album by a band, a heavy metal band called System of a Down. They had an album called Toxicity. Really interesting. A lot of, when you think back on what we've been through with the Patriot Act and just well, both Patriot Acts and everything that where we're heading, it seemed like this album was just about to call all that stuff out, like just ahead of time. And if I were to read just some of, I remember, you know, it came out September 4th, 2001. Okay, so there's a song. The opening song to the album is called Prison Song, and it's, you know, the chorus of the song is, you know, they're trying to build a prison for you and me to live in, and there's this part right here I thought was interesting. All research and successful drug policies show that treatment should be increased and law enforcement decreased while abolishing mandatory minimum sentences. And then he says, utilizing drugs to pay for secret wars around the world. Drugs are now your global policy. Now you police the globe. And to open a record like that up right before 9/11, and then to have the first single off the record, a song called Chop Suey, the chorus to the song just tripped me out because I remember hearing it on the radio after those buildings fell, and the chorus was, I don't think you trust in my self-righteous suicide. I cry when angels deserve to die. And I just think about that, like, you have the suicide bombers, and now we're talking fallen angels. I mean, you know, this can all be coincidental, and I'm not trying to, you know, this is hyper speculation here, but I mean, we know that they can plant things. And the last thing I will leave on this note is, Leonard's brought this up, I think in your most recent interview with Rob, you talked about the Illuminati card-playing game. Maybe it wasn't in that interview, maybe it was in another one, but you have 2 cards from that set, you know, back in 1995, I believe, that this came out. You have the Pentagon blowing up on this card, and then you have another one where it says terrorist nuke, and it's basically 2 towers exploding. And I don't know if it specifically says what towers, but it's just really interesting that you'd find both those there. So I just had to kind of leave it there. And when I think about 9/11, this is just me, but when I think about the destruction of cities and the destruction of civilizations, I think of, you know, the sci-fi side of things. When we see these futuristic cities that are being built that are just so high-tech, you know, in these crazy movies, well, if, you know, again, speculation, but if we're ever to get there, we certainly can't have these old buildings, right? So that's just what I'm going to leave you with on my tip.
You know, there's all kinds of interesting theories as to what did bring down the towers. I think the most credible one is thermite. And you talked about, Leonard, earlier, state-of-the-art military equipment and stuff like that. The thermite that they found was military-grade thermite. And, I mean, there's so many things that you can look at 9/11 and say, okay, how did people operating out of a cave and using box cutters get NORAD to stand down? How did they control NORAD? Okay, I mean I mean, Building 7 is the biggest smoking gun, but for me, the next one, next biggest one is NORAD. You know, NORAD will show up. You know, F-16 will fly right alongside your Cessna pretty quick if you just so happen to cross over some airspace you shouldn't be over. And yet, here's all these planes flying around all day, all morning, and you know, where are the F-16s? Well, they're doing an exercise someplace on the other side of the country, you know, or hundreds of miles away or whatever. So there's that. But then there's the thermite. I mean, we've already established that jet fuel and office fires cannot weaken or melt steel. And yet, for weeks after 9/11, there was molten steel in the basements and in the rubble. Even after, I think, 2 rainstorms, if I remember right, had flooded the whole area. Underwater, you still had burning molten steel. Right? No one can explain that, aside from people who acknowledge the fact that it was thermite. There's no other explanation for it. So, you know, and for it to have been thermite, that meant that somebody on the inside had to have had access to the building in the days and perhaps weeks and maybe even months leading up to 9/11 to rig it, to put everything in place where it needed to be for the thermite to do its job, to cause the implosion that led to a free fall speed total collapse of the buildings. So, I mean, at that point, you have got to acknowledge that we did this to ourselves. You know, and the fact that our own media, as you pointed out, in music, cartoons, television shows, movies, we're all displaying this stuff in plain sight for in some cases years in advance before it happened. To me, again, if you're hearing this for the first time, don't believe a single thing you heard for the last 2 hours. Go look it up for yourself, because the evidence is out there. There's no more excuse. Your mic's still muted.
You had mentioned that, you know, when I asked that initial question at the beginning about, you know, how come it's so hard to fathom, you know, for us to accept, you know, this conspiracy theory, you know, that they've given to us. How come it's so hard to believe that our government would do it to us? But, you know, you talked about were you in China? Was that you said? Yeah. And you talked to that man, and he talked about the, you know, we're just putting our embassies everywhere. I mean, you know, I was looking at just the list. If you can go to check the list of all the embassies that the U.S. has, I mean, we're talking little islands. We're talking everything. You know, we're everywhere except for North Korea at this point. And, I mean, that's, to me, I mean, the saddest thing is, you know, as Leonard gets ready to release The Illusion of Money, I really think this is going to impact a lot of people when this is done, because, you know, the saddest thing to me is that if we go to war with China right now, okay, I mean, I don't care what country, China, who owns both sides of that money situation? Who stands to gain? None of us stand to gain from that, but somebody does.
Oh yeah, for sure. Let me put this back up on the screen here. This list of videos that I talked about, and I just realized there's one not listed here that dealt with JFK, because there is an interesting JFK connection to all of this. I apologize for not having it up here. Maybe I can email it to you. You guys can put it up at some point later. But the who did it and why section here, and again, I'm going to highlight Leonard's video here, New World Order, Secret Societies, and Biblical Prophecy. I mean, because when you realize what's going on with the bankers and who the elite are, and I didn't plan this, but it just so happens to form the shape of a pyramid here. didn't intentionally put it that way, but all of a sudden it just jumped out at me. Hello. Yeah, there are a select group of people, very, very extremely wealthy people, and I don't remember if it was Leonard that I was talking to or who I was talking to recently, or maybe it was just a video I was watching, I don't remember, but if you do a search on the wealthiest people in the world, I think it shows some Spanish family in Mexico, 24 billion or something like that, and you're like, what? but then when you and I forget what the search is that you have to do. Oh no, we went out to Sheila and I went out to dinner with a couple the other day, and he was telling me, the guy was telling me this, and he says, but if you do if you kind of narrow that search down and you kind of go for like net worth of Rockefellers or Rothschilds, and I mean it is trillions and trillions and trillions of incomprehensible numbers. They're the ones, to answer your question. I mean, they're the ones that are financing these things. They're the ones that benefit from it. Follow the money.
Well, I think that this has been great, Rob, Leonard. I really appreciate you guys coming on. I apologize that I've been quiet here. I'm kind of having a bit of health issues, but I have really enjoyed it. Is there anything else you guys would like to add before we wrap it up here?
I think that Volume 2 of my series is going to be perfectly timed. I have spent the past 3 years of my life essentially being in a holding pattern due to, again, health issues, and I've gotten a lot more energy now than I used to, and I think I told the guys here that I was ready to sell my house to keep moving forward for Volume 2 because I thought that would free up some of my time and energy. And wow, you know, God never changes in his pattern, in his patterns of acting with humanity. And I'm telling you, there's a lot to be said about the Shemitah, and if you don't know about that, pick up a book called The Harbinger, pick up the book, The Mystery of the Shemitah, read it, form your own opinion about it, but in the end, Satan and his minions are actually God's tool. It's very hard for people to realize that because unless you go back and just read the Bible, especially the Old Testament, where Israel would misbehave and God would allow other nations, other empires to rise up to judge Israel, and then God would judge those nations that judged Israel. So in the end, our hope as Christians is that evil is God's tool. God is still in control. And the worst thing you can do with a Christian is just simply change where you live, whether it's here in the physical realm or up in the spiritual realm. And the verse that Rob kept bringing up, you know, God does nothing except warn its prophets first. The elite are so arrogant and bold as to tell you what they're going to do. That may not mean that they're always able to do it because God puts in limits. That's another good piece of news. When Job was being tempted, God said, "You will not kill him." Okay, that was a limit. And so the smart thing for us to do is, as the Bible says, the wise man sees trouble coming and gets out of the way. Now, you may not be able to escape to your own private bunker on some island, but you can reduce your dependency on the system. You can prepare out of prudence and not paranoia. The last place you want to be in a major crisis is at a bank or a shopping mall or at a gas bar. So what can you do to reduce your dependency on the system? What can you do to build a hedge of protection spiritually around your home? And one of the things, like Rob mentioned, is just turn off the TV. You're giving the enemy a foothold right there. The TV is spying on you, okay? So just turn it off.
Turn it off and turn the scriptures on. That's where your hope is. That's where the real news is, and that's where you'll find everything you need to know about your Savior and the God that loves you, and where you can find safety, peace in times of trouble. You know, He gives us the peace that passes all understanding, and you know, perfect love casts out all fear. And I'll just kind of end with a really quick story. when I went to Cuba, I've been there twice. The first time I was there, I got off the plane and I was with, we were all paired up in pairs, and the guy that I was with had all the Christian literature in his bag. And so they flagged him in customs, and these guys with AK-47s took him away. When they realized that I was buddied up with him, they took me away. And I had all this camera equipment and stuff in my bags. So I'm freaking out, you know, and it was a scene like something you would see in The Godfather or something. I mean, like this, take me in this little room, they got these dudes with machine guns and this really big guy with a cigar. He puts my bag on the table, he's looking at me, smoking his Cuban cigar, and he says, "Open the bag." I'm thinking, oh, great. So I open up the bag, and now I, because of previous travel experiences, have realized that foreign food doesn't always agree with me, so a lot of times I would pack my own food, and I made Ziploc bags for like each day of prepackaged MREs and different things like that to eat, and I used that as stuffing to protect my camera equipment from being jostled around. So he turns the bag around and he opens it up, and all I see is his knuckles on the top of the bag because he's opened it up towards me. You know, he's like, "What's this for? What are you bringing all this into my country for?" And you know, Scripture says, "Don't worry about what you're going to say because you'll be given what to say." At that time, now I wasn't given anything profound to say. In fact, I was about ready to just open my mouth. I had no idea what I was going to say when he grabbed a Ziploc bag of Capri Sun juice packs and mixed nuts. He said, "What's this for? What are you bringing this to my country for?" So I went, "Special diet?" And he goes, "Okay," and closed up my bag, zipped it up, and let me go. I mean, there's no reason why he should have let me go. For all counts, they should have taken me away, but they didn't. And the rest of the team was praying for us, the two of us that got taken away, and the other guy, he was eventually released, but they took all of his materials. Then I ended up having to go back there a number of weeks later, and because I didn't get everything I needed to get the first time, and although the first time I went with a team of people, the second time I was sent down by myself. And I was going to be 3 days alone in Havana, in a third world country, Spanish-speaking country that I don't know the language, and all by myself. And so I was going to be there for 3 days before I was to meet up with the people who were already in country that were going to come get me. Well, on the flight down to Mexico, because you can't fly direct, I was really scared. I was full of fear. But I remember that scripture, perfect love casts out all fear. So on the whole flight down to Cancun, I'm praying, "Father, fill me with your perfect love. Fill me with your perfect love, because I'm scared. Lord, fill me with your perfect love. Fill me with your perfect love." By the time I got to Cancun, I was jacked out of my mind, excited about the next leg from Cancun to Havana. I couldn't wait to get there. Man, I was there. I practically wanted to, you know, get Hawaiian lays out and put them on the soldiers or something. You know, I was like loving everybody. He had taken away all of my fear, filled me with his perfect love. And the next morning, I woke up in my hotel room. The downstairs office was buzzing me, saying there was somebody there to see me, and I knew no one was supposed to be there to see me for 3 days. So I was a little concerned about that, and I went down there, and it turned out to be a guy that I met on the previous trip, who somehow, some way, found out that I was in town. I don't know how, but he found out. This guy hopped on. He hitchhiked. He rode bicycles. He lived 4 hours away from Havana. But just because somehow he heard that I was in town, on a whim and a step of faith, he did everything he could to get to Havana, and he spent 3 days with me during that time when I was terrified to be alone. God made a way where there didn't seem to be a way. He took away all my fear and made it a totally amazing, joyous time of fellowship with another brother. And so I have that small example. Right? I mean, that's nothing compared to what's coming. But it is an example that I have. Faith builds upon faith. That builds my faith, okay, for the days ahead. So our only hope is not in guns, gold, you know, groceries. You know, I think it's prudent to prepare. nothing wrong with that, but this whole prepper movement and everything, there's only so much groceries you can store up. There's only so much guns and so much ammo you can get. And frankly, our military is so far advanced that all they have to do is beam something and your organs are going to melt. So all your guns aren't going to do you any good anyway. So I'm past all that. The old Boy Scout and Army guy, be prepared. That guy used to want to have all that stockpiled. This guy, A, I can't afford it, and B, I don't need it anymore. My hope is not in that. My hope is in the relationship that I have with Yeshua, with Jesus Christ, with my Lord and Savior, and getting under the shelter of the Almighty. All right, and that only comes from obeying Him. And so that's where I want to encourage you all to go, is to get into the shelter of the Almighty, get that relationship, because there's only one way to the Father, and that's through His Son. He's the one that points the way to the Father. You can't get to the Father except through Him. So you repent of your sin, you ask Him to be your Lord and Savior, to come into your life, to save you, and to be the Lord of your life. That's step one. Step two, start trying to get out of Babylon in any way that you can. What does that mean? Well, start praying about it. God will tell you. Hey, you might want to let go of that. You might want to stop doing that. Right? And everything else, the instructions are in the Bible right there. And I just realized I did have that video on the screen as I was looking at it. I'm going to put it back up just as a side note to the previous question. It's this video right here. Everything is a rich man's trick. It's actually JFK to 9/11 is the full title, but if you just did everything is a rich man's trick, that helps you follow the money and figure out what who stands to benefit and all that. So that's my story. That's all I have to say.
Right on. Well, if I could ask you, Rob, to close us out in a prayer, and then have Leonard close us out in a prayer as well, that would be excellent.
Happy to.
So, go ahead.
Father God, Lord, I just want to thank you, first of all, for allowing us to be born in this time. Lord, we look at the things that are going on around us, and it's tempting to be afraid. And a lot of things are frightening. But Father, your word tells us, as I just got finished saying, that your perfect love casts out all fear, and that you give us the peace that passes all understanding. So Father, I pray that this discussion doesn't cause anybody to be in fear. I do pray that it causes people's eyes to be opened, and that they become more aware of what's going on, and that they will not fall prey to the coming great deception that in many ways is already here. Father, I pray that scales will fall from people's eyes, that they'll stop trusting in a political solution to a spiritual problem, that they will seek you, get right with you and their fellow man. And so, Father, I pray that nothing we have said or done here in this broadcast will cause people to live in fear. I pray that the things that were said and done in this broadcast will bring honor and glory to your name and cause people to seek the truth out for themselves. And so, Lord, I just want to thank you for the opportunity we've had to talk this evening. And Lord, I pray a hedge of protection against everybody in this broadcast, whether they were speaking or just listening. Father, I pray that the plans of the enemy will come to nothing, that you will cause confusion in the enemy's camp, that no weapon formed against us will prosper, and that if anybody tries to do something, Father, that it will backfire. And Father, anybody who has ill intent, Father, I pray you just cause confusion in the enemy's camp as you did so many times in the past. And when Israel was about to be wiped out by the Assyrians, you sent the angel of the Lord to wipe out 180,000 of the troops overnight. Boom, gone. So Father, right now I pray that you just send your angels out to protect us, to put a hedge of protection around us. I pray for health for those who are struggling with healing, that need healing, Father. I pray for healing over Dan and anybody else that may be struggling right now, Father. I pray by your Son's stripes we are healed. So I just declare healing right now by the blood of Yeshua, by the blood that was shed not only for the remission of our sins but also for our healing. So we declare healing and protection, Father, and we thank you for all of it, for the incredible package deal that we have, for our forgiveness, for our healing, for our deliverance, and for our protection. And we pray these things in your Son's name. Amen.
Father in heaven, we think about all the empires and systems of power that the Bible details, and how the Israelites and the disciples were up against huge forces. What they were up against is so much more than what we're up against, and yet the story has never changed. So may we look to those examples that have been recorded for us as signs that you are always with us and that you'll never leave us and forsake us. And I just pray that we would be aware that we are being sent out like sheep among wolves, and that we must be as wise as serpents and gentle as doves, that we not give into a spirit of fear, but have a spirit of grace around us, so that we are ready to share the gospel to those who are in fear among us, and that we would not be fear for ourselves, but rather be agents of change in the way that all the characters mentioned throughout the Bible were agents of change in their time and in their culture, because you are the truth. You do not change in a world that's so full of deception. There is always that hope, and that you've always been our hope. And we thank you for that in Jesus' name.
Amen. All right, guys.
So how do we publish this or take it down, or what do we do?
Sam, mute your mic. I will. Actually, I'll stop the broadcast right now. So here we go. Stop it.